Welcome to the Shepherd's Toolbox, where pastors gain guidance, tools, and insight for counseling well. Here's your host, Dr. Lance Flood.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Shepherd's Toolbox. I'm your host, Dr. Lance Flood. If you're a pastor, a church staff member, a lay counselor, or anyone in ministry leadership, this podcast is for you. Every week we're going to tackle a different counseling topic, things like CBT, trauma recovery, depression, anxiety, addiction, and grief. And I'm going to show you how to actually use these tools in real ministry contexts. Just practical, biblical, boots-on-the-ground training that you can use immediately. Because here's the reality. You're expected to counsel everyone. The couple whose marriage is falling apart, the teenager who's cutting, the man drowning in addiction, the woman who can't get out of bed, and most of you have never been trained how. So that's what we're doing here. Professional level clinical training without all the nonsense. So be sure to tune in every week for a new episode wherever you listen to podcasts. Today, we're going to be talking about empathy, the kind of empathy that actually helps people without drowning you in the process. But before we dive in, let me tell you about a pastor friend of mine. It seems he was out golfing with an engineer friend and a doctor friend of his, and they had been stuck behind this group for way too long. Finally, the engineer in the group had enough and flagged down the groundskeeper, and he said, "Hey, what's going on with these guys? They're slower than molasses." So the groundskeeper got real quiet, and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. Those three men are actually former firefighters, and they lost their sight rescuing children from a fire at our clubhouse." Well, my pastor friend immediately teared up. "Oh, my goodness." He said, "Can I get their information? I'd love to rally our church together and maybe provide some financial support for these heroes." The doctor also nodded thoughtfully and said, "I actually know an ophthalmologist. Let me see if I can at least get them in for a consultation at no charge." Finally, the engineer stared at both of them and then turned to the groundskeeper and said, "Why can't they just play at night?" Now, if you laughed at that, you're my people. If you didn't, this is probably the part where you don't hit the subscribe button. Either way, I'm glad you're here for now. But here's the thing. That engineer, zero empathy. He solved the problem logically without any awareness of the human element. And honestly, that's a lot of us in ministry when we're not careful. We jump straight to solutions rather than sitting in the pain first. So let's talk about how to actually do empathy right. Let's say you're sitting across from someone who's falling apart. Their marriage is crumbling. Their kid is on drugs. They've just got the diagnosis they were dreading. And they're looking at you like you're supposed to have some answers. Well, here's what happens next for most pastors. You feel their pain so deeply that it becomes your pain. You carry it home. You wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about it and you can't shake it. So 6 months from now, you're burned out and wondering if you can keep doing this anymore. Real empathy isn't that. It's not the kind that drowns you. It's not the kind that makes you useless. It's actually the kind that helps people heal while keeping you healthy enough to be there for the next person who needs you. Because here's what nobody tells you. Empathy and compassion fatigue are not the same thing. One is a skill and the other is what happens when you do it wrong. Let me explain what I mean. Most pastors think that they're being empathetic when they're actually being sympathetic, and the difference matters more than you think. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone. It's pity. It's looking down into the pit that they're in and saying, "Man, that's awful. I'm so sorry you're down there." Sympathy keeps distance. It's safe for you, but it doesn't really help them. Empathy is climbing down into the pit with them. It's saying, "Look, I'm here with you. I see you, and I'm feeling what you're feeling." But here's the key. You're not trapped down there. You know the way out, and you're choosing to be present in their pain without drowning in it. Brené Brown says that empathy is feeling with people, not for them. And that little preposition changes everything. When you feel for someone, you absorb their emotions like a sponge. Their anxiety becomes your anxiety. Their depression seeps into your bones. So you take it home and you can't turn it off. But when you feel with someone, you're present to their experience without making it your own. You're a mirror rather than a sponge. You reflect back what they're feeling so they can be seen and understood, but you don't absorb it. And that's the skill we're going to build today. Let's talk about why this really matters in ministry. You need empathy to help people. If you can't connect emotionally, you can't counsel. People don't open up to robots. They don't trust people who seem detached or clinical. They need to know that you get it. But if you feel everything everyone else feels, you'll be done in 6 months. You're going to burn out and you're going to resent your congregation. You're going to dread every single phone call because you know it's someone else's crisis that's about to become yours. I want you to trust me on this because I've watched too many good pastors flame out because they never learned this distinction. They thought caring deeply meant carrying everything, but it doesn't. Caring deeply means being present without being consumed. The clinical framework of real empathy has 3 parts: cognitive empathy, emotional empathy, and compassionate empathy. First, cognitive empathy is understanding someone's perspective. You get why they think and feel the way they do. You can see the world through their eyes without agreeing with everything that they see. Emotional empathy is feeling what they feel in the moment. You sit in sadness with sad people. You feel the weight of their grief and you sense their anxiety in your own chest. Compassionate empathy is the action step. This is where you're being moved to help. It's not just understanding and feeling, it's actually doing something about it. Most pastors are great at cognitive empathy. You're trained to see different perspectives, you study theology and culture and human nature, and you can usually figure out why people think the way they do. And most of you are too good at emotional empathy. You feel everything. You cry with people. You lie awake worrying about them and carry their burdens like they're your own. But compassionate empathy is where the real magic happens. It's empathy that moves you to act without destroying you in the process. But before we get into how we do empathy right, I want to show you where most pastors get it wrong, because I've seen how these patterns can destroy good church leaders who genuinely love their people but didn't know any better. The first one we're going to call the oversympathizer. So this is the pastor who feels everything. Every tear in their office becomes their tear. Every crisis is their crisis. And so they're drowning in other people's emotions because they think that's what it means to care. But pastor, listen to me. It's not. It's actually poor boundaries. And within a year, you're going to be burnt out and resentful. The next person we're going to call the fix-it guy. This is the pastor who can't sit with pain. This is someone who shares their struggle, and before they finish the sentence, he's already got 3 solutions in a Bible verse. And he just skips empathy entirely and jumps straight to problem solving. So people leave this pastor feeling unheard and like their pain doesn't matter enough to acknowledge. Another type is the emotional robot. This is the church leader who learned somewhere along the way that professionalism means detachment. They listen, they nod, and they say the appropriate things, but there's no warmth or connection. They're technically doing the right things, but people can feel the distance, and so nobody opens up to someone who feels like a therapist bot. The next one is what we'll call the absorbed absorber. This one's kind of subtle because the pastor's empathetic in the moment and genuinely present, connected, and feeling with people, but they never let it go. They carry every session home, they replay conversations at dinner, and they lose sleep over other people's problems. They're doing empathy right in the room, but they're destroying themselves afterward. And then finally, there's the avoider. This is the pastor who used to be empathetic but got burned out. So now they're dodging counseling situations entirely. They don't return calls, they refer out too quickly, or they've overcorrected from absorption to avoidance, and now people can't get help when they really need it. Now, if you saw yourself in any of those, you're not alone. Most of us has been in at least 2 of these situations at different points in ministry. But I want to introduce you to a concept that's really changed my practice, and it's called the empathy window. I want you to imagine a window. When you're counseling someone, you're looking through that window into their world. You can see their plane clearly, and you can feel the temperature of their emotions. But there's glass between you and them. That glass isn't coldness or distance. It's professional boundaries and self-awareness and the ability to be fully present without losing yourself. When the window is open too wide, you're going to fall through into their world. You get lost in their emotions, and you can't help them because you're drowning too. When the window's closed too tight, you're looking at them like they're in a fishbowl. You're detached. It's clinical and safe for you, but it's also useless for them. So the skill is going to be keeping that window at the right opening. You're close enough to feel and connect, but you're not falling through. So how do we actually do this? I want to give you some practical tools here to help you develop some healthy empathy. First, I want you to name the emotion that you're observing. Don't absorb it, but name it. You're feeling overwhelmed right now, or this is bringing up a lot of anger. Here are a few examples. You're feeling overwhelmed right now. This is bringing up a lot of anger, or I'm sensing deep sadness in you. When you name what you see, you're using cognitive empathy, so you're noticing without absorbing. Then second, I want you to use your body as information, not absorption. If you feel tension in your chest while they're talking, well, that's data. It might mean that they're anxious. It might mean that you're picking up on something unspoken, but you don't have to keep that tension. Notice it, use it, and let it go. Third, I want you to practice the phrase, I'm with you in this. Not, I know exactly how you feel, just, I'm with you. This can also be called a ministry of presence because it communicates presence without claiming their experience as your own. This is a necessary way to gain rapport with a client. Fourth, I want you to take mental step backs. So in the middle of an intense moment, you can literally picture yourself taking 1 step back. You're still in the room and engaged, but you're creating just enough space to stay clear-headed. Finally, I want you to debrief after hard sessions. Call a colleague, journal, pray about it. Do something to process what you've encountered without holding on to it. This is what we refer to as professional hygiene. Now, there are some red flags that are involved with compassion fatigue, and you need to know when you're sliding from empathy into compassion fatigue. So here are some warning signs. Maybe you're thinking about clients when you're not with them. Not just occasionally, but constantly. You're replaying conversations you had during the session. You're worrying about them at dinner. You're dreaming about their problems. Maybe you're irritable with people who should matter to you. Your spouse asks how your day was and you snap. Maybe your kids want to play with you and you just don't have the energy because you're just emotionally drained. Perhaps you feel numb in sessions. You used to tear up with people and now you're just going through the motions. You hear another story of abuse or loss and you just feel nothing. Maybe you're avoiding counseling altogether. You're finding new reasons not to return calls and hoping people don't even ask you for help. Finally, perhaps you're having physical problems like headaches, abdominal issues, you can't sleep or eat. Your body is telling you there's something drastically wrong. And if any of these things are happening, you've passed empathy and are into fatigue. And we need to make some changes now. I realize we've talked a good bit about compassion fatigue in this episode, but that's actually just one of 4 related problems that can take you out if you're not careful. I want to define all 4 for you because they're different, they show up differently, and you need to recognize which one you're dealing with. By the way, it's not uncommon for you to be battling more than one at a time. Once again, for review, compassion fatigue is just the cumulative loss of caring. It's what happens over time when you're constantly present to other people's suffering. You begin to feel emotionally numb and detached. You lose the sense of meaning and satisfaction in your work. So now as a counselor, you're going through the motions, but the fire's gone out. Some common symptoms include apathy towards your clients, irritability, maybe a reduced ability to feel empathy at all, a sense of helplessness, and maybe even questioning whether or not ministry is worth it anymore. The next one is vicarious traumatization, and that's when you absorb so much of other people's trauma that it changes how you see the world. You hear enough abuse stories and suddenly you're suspicious of everyone. You walk through enough grief and loss, you start believing tragedy is always around the corner. Your worldview tends to shift with vicarious traumatization. You end up losing your sense of safety and become cynical. So symptoms include intrusive thoughts about clients' trauma, difficulty trusting people, maybe a heightened sense of vulnerability, a loss of hope, spiritual struggles, and maybe even feeling like the world is just darker than you used to believe it was. The third category I want to talk to you about is called secondary traumatic stress. This is basically PTSD, but you get it from someone else's trauma rather than your own. You didn't experience the car accident, the assault, the combat, or the abuse, but you heard about it in such detail, felt it so deeply, that your nervous system responds like it happened to you. So symptoms begin to look like classic PTSD. Hypervigilance, exaggerated startle response, nightmares about client stories, avoidance of trauma-related content, intrusive images or thoughts, difficulty concentrating, and even physical anxiety symptoms like a racing heart or sweating when reminding of clients' experiences. The final category is burnout, and this is different from the other 3 because it's not specifically about empathy or trauma exposure. Burnout is simply exhaustion and cynicism about the work itself. It's when you're overworked, under-resourced, underappreciated, and you just can't do it anymore. So symptoms here include chronic exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, cynicism about ministry or just people in general, reduced sense of accomplishment, physical symptoms again like headaches or abdominal pain, withdrawal from responsibilities, and feeling like you're just surviving rather than thriving. Now I want to be honest with you, I've been there, and I've been there on more than one occasion. And here's what makes this tricky. You can have more than one at the same time, as I alluded to earlier. You can be burned out and vicariously traumatized at the same time. You can have compassion fatigue and secondary traumatic stress. They overlap, they feed on each other, and if you don't address them, they will end your ministry. So what are we going to do about it today? I want to give you some practical strategies that actually work to combat these challenges. First, there's got to be some consultation. You can't do this work alone. You need a ministry colleague. Maybe it's another pastor on staff. Maybe it's an elder or a deacon. Someone who you can debrief with regularly after hard sessions or triggering content. Someone who understands the work and can help you process what you're carrying. Second, you need to have clear boundaries between work and home. I want you to create a ritual that marks the transition. For me, I love to change clothes when I get home. Now, if you see me at work, I'm probably dressed casual, but at home, I'm in sweats and a t-shirt. But it really helps me put away the cares of the day. Other people might take a 5-minute walk around the block. So find something that signals to your brain that work is over, I'm present now, and then be present. Please don't bring counseling home to your family, because I fear if you do, you might be my next client. Third, I want you to limit your exposure. You don't have to take every counseling case that comes your way. You don't have to be the trauma specialist for your entire congregation. If you're already handling heavy cases, it's okay to refer the next one out. If you've had 3 abuse disclosures this week, you can tell the 4th person you need to connect them with someone else. In order to be sustainable in counseling, you've got to protect your capacity. Fourth, I want you to engage in activities that restore you. Now, sometimes people take the suggestion and just focus on activities that distract them, but I need you to focus on activities that actually fill you back up. So again, for some people, that may be physical exercise. For others, it's creative work. Maybe it's being in nature, but you've got to figure out what it takes to restore your soul and do it regularly, not just when you're already empty. Fifth, I want you to monitor your symptoms. Keep a journal. Check in with yourself weekly. Am I sleeping well? Am I irritable? Am I avoiding people? Am I having intrusive thoughts? Early detection matters, and if you can catch compassion fatigue early, you can course correct. If you ignore it until you're completely burned out, recovery is a deep process. Sixth, I want you to diversify your ministry. If all you're doing is heavy counseling, you're going to burn out. You've got to balance crisis work with sermon prep, teaching, administration, discipleship, community events, things that will fill you up instead of drain you. Can you imagine if Jesus spent 100% of his time with the sick and demon-possessed? He also went to dinner parties, he told stories, he taught in synagogues, and he hung out with friends. I think that's an excellent example. And then finally, know when to step back. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is take a sabbatical from counseling. Not forever, but maybe for just a season. If you're showing signs of STS or vicarious traumatization, you might need a few months away from trauma work while you get your own nervous system regulated again. That's why we offer free resources like the Legacy Institute to train your team in pastoral counseling and help alleviate some of the burdens that you carry. You can learn more about that at our website at floodlegacy.org. But let me be blunt. If you ignore these strategies, you're not going to make it, Pastor. The statistics on pastoral burnout are horrifying. The average pastor lasts 5 years, and a huge chunk of that is because they never learned how to care for others without destroying themselves. You know the old adage, you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't give what you don't have, and you can't sustain empathy if you're running on fumes. Okay, so let's ground this topic in Scripture, because I know some of you may be wondering if this sounds too clinical or self-protective. In Romans 12:15, the Apostle Paul says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep." That's empathy. We're called to enter into each other's emotions. But notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't say, take on their joy as your own permanent state, or let their grief become your depression. Galatians 6:2 says, bear one another's burdens. We're supposed to help carry what people can't carry alone. But down in verse 5, he says, each will have to bear his own load. See, there are things that only they can carry. You can't do their healing for them. Once again, Jesus modeled empathy perfectly. He wept with Mary and Martha. He felt compassion for crowds. He was moved by suffering. But then he also went away to pray alone. He created space. Listen to me. He didn't carry every person's pain to the cross. He carried our sin. That was his burden. Their healing was their response to his work. None of us are Jesus, and we certainly can't save anyone. But we can be present. We can point them to the one who saves, but we can't fix them, heal them, or even carry what only they can carry. So let me get specific about what this looks like in your context. When someone comes to you in crisis, your first job isn't to fix it. It's to help them feel less alone in it. Empathy tells them, you're not crazy for feeling this way. This is difficult, and I'm here. When you're counseling ongoing situations, I want you to check in with yourself every 10 minutes. Am I still thinking clearly? Am I feeling their emotions or my own emotions about their situation? If you find yourself losing clarity, take a breath and take that mental step back. When you leave a counseling session, I want you to picture yourself leaving their stuff in that room. You gave them your full presence while you were there. Now you're going home to your family, and they deserve your full presence at home. And here's the hard one. When someone's situation is consuming you, you need to refer them out. If you can't maintain empathy without drowning, they need someone who can. So refer them to another pastoral staff member. And if there isn't one available, again, take advantage of our free training resources. And if you need someone to refer right now, even if it's yourself, book an appointment with me. That's just another free resource offered to you through our organization. Let's move into this week's challenge. Here's what I want you to do this week, Pastor. I want you to pick one counseling conversation. It could be formal or informal. Pay attention to your body during the conversation. Where do you feel tension? What emotions are you noticing? Are you absorbing or observing? Again, this isn't referring to your body language that you should display while you're talking to someone. We'll discuss that in a future episode. And then after the conversation, I want you to take 5 minutes to debrief with yourself. What did you feel there? What belongs to them and what belongs to you? What do you feel tempted to carry that you need to set down? I want you to begin practicing the skill of being fully present without being fully consumed. It's going to feel weird at first. You might even feel guilty, like you're not caring enough. But listen to me, you're not caring less. You're caring sustainably. All right, before we close out our first episode, it's time for what's going to be my favorite part of this show. I'm calling it Name That Pattern. This is where I'm going to give you a clinical term for something that you've probably seen every week but didn't know had a name. So I want you to think of it like learning a new word for an old frustration. Today's pattern is the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Maybe you know that guy in your church who read one article about marriage and now he's counseling every couple he meets. Or maybe the woman who watched a TED Talk on anxiety and suddenly she's diagnosing half the congregation. Or my personal favorite, the teenager who took intro to psychology at his community college and now thinks he can psychoanalyze everyone at youth group. That, Pastor, is called Dunning-Kruger. Here's how it works. The less someone actually knows about a topic, the more confident they are that they've mastered it. So people who are incompetent at something don't know enough to recognize their own incompetence. It's more ignorance than arrogance. They genuinely believe that they've got it figured out because they don't know what they don't know yet. So the guy who studied marriage therapy for years, well, he's going to tell you how much he still doesn't understand. The teenager with one psych class, he's got everybody figured out. And here's why this matters for you right now. When you start practicing these empathy skills, you're going to think you've nailed it pretty quickly. A few sessions in, you'll feel like, okay, I've got this. Empathy, check. Well, that may be Dunning-Kruger talking. Real mastery of empathy takes years. It takes some screwing up. It's going to take some sessions where you absorbed way too much or stayed way too distant. And it takes failure and adjustment, along with some brutal self-awareness. So here's my advice to you. Stay humble and stay teachable. The more you learn about counseling, the more you'll realize how much you still have to learn. And weirdly, that's actually proof you're getting better at it. Welcome to the journey. So to wrap up, empathy is a skill rather than a personality trait. Now, if you have absolutely no empathy, then you're a sociopath and you're probably not interested in listening to my podcast. I'm going to presume you're all just fairly healthy pastors, as healthy as any pastor can be, right? But you can develop empathy. You can practice it and get better at it without burning out. So feel with people, not for them. Be present without being consumed, and stay close enough to connect, but not so close that you lose yourself. You'll want to tune in next week when we talk about active listening. You think you know how to listen? Most pastors don't. We're going to cover reflective listening, minimal encouragers, and why you need to shut up more than you think. Until then, practice that sustainable empathy. Your people need you healthy, not heroic. I appreciate you joining me for the inaugural episode of the Shepherd's Toolbox, and I hope you'll join me next Tuesday at 6 a.m. for another discussion. I also want to make you aware of my other weekly podcasts. First of all, there's The Flood Zone, which airs Thursdays at 6 a.m. and help couples navigate the real challenges of marriages with honesty, hope, and even a little bit of humor thrown in. Best of all, it includes guidance for the pastors who are leading them through those issues. We tackle difficult topics like pornography addiction, emotional affairs, sexless marriages, and much more. Next, there's Unfiltered, Pastors Off the Clock. This is a brand new podcast that will air Saturday mornings at 6 a.m. and will feature two pastors with opposite views on a controversial topic within the church. I'll host weekly roundtable discussions that facilitate honest conversations on the issues dividing the church and modeling how faithful Christians can disagree well. If you're interested in being a guest on an upcoming episode, be sure to shoot an email to drflood@floodlegacy.org. That's drflood @floodlegacy.org, and I'll be happy to send along a list of topics for you to choose from. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for listening.
This has been a production of Amnesty Media Group, a division of the Flood Legacy Foundation. To learn more about the foundation, please visit floodlegacy.org.